Hey, good evening, good morning, folks.
Oh, no.
Hey,
Hi, Rahul.
hello.
Good evening.
Hey, good evening. Okay, let's wait for 1 minute more. We have a full agenda today. I'm just going to open up the page. Unless someone wants to do agenda bashing, if someone wants to add to this agenda, please let me know right now so that we can shuffle the time accordingly. And folks, please, if you think you have a topic to be presented, please, you should be in a position to edit it yourself and add the agenda. Okay, so I think we are good to start. I wish we could have had a few more other folks. We have Tom, and I wonder if there's anyone else from SIG Release who could have joined. That would have been great. Let's give a minute more. Okay, quickly to skim through all the action items based on our last meeting. I think this is the document is already shared. Thank you. Thanks to Brian and team. Secrets management user story document review. I think this was this review was done. Thank you, Tom. We will be discussing about this today. Service mesh requirements review. I'm not sure if we have received the review here, but you know, this is an open action item. Let's keep it open. Subhash, anything on this aspect? Do you want to keep it here? How do you want to proceed on this?
Yeah, Rahul. Actually, I prepared for one user story around the package validation.
Okay.
So already I added in the agenda item.
Right. Yeah.
So that we can go through it today, actually.
Okay. Okay. It's added to today's agenda item.
Yes, just now I added.
Just now. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's see if we can find some time for it. Thank you. Prashant, I think this is already done. I can mark this closed. We have a user story document, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And the Flow Monitor PR, Ved has an update. I believe Ved shared me a link before the call. And Ved, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I have raised the PR for adding Flow Monitor, for adding Nephew to Flow Monitor. So I have a reply from Tejo, one of the maintainers in Flow Monitor. So he will be adding LFN, and after that only we will be able to add Nephew to the Flow Monitor tracking.
Will he be adding LFN himself, or would he need someone from this team to add LFN? So maybe you can reply back, because based on what he has said, it would be best if we add. So we can't assume here that he'll be adding it. If we can reply back saying what are the, if we can specify the steps that would be needed to add, that would be great.
Yeah, sure.
Super. Thank you. I'll add this to the, so we can keep this action item open, right? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Anything else before we move on to the agenda? Right. So maybe first on the discussion agenda is service mesh update. Shiv, would you like to present something? Is there anything specific that you would like to mention?
I have I think a few comments from which have come in on the document. So I'll just respond to that. But I think apart from that, I don't have an update.
Fantastic. Super. Who did this review? Is it?
Ding Byung.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. So he basically gave his comments, and so probably is yeah. So I just wanted to discuss. Yeah, I just wanted to discuss that issue.
I'm also providing comment to the document, and
Yeah, so you mean for the any other operator controllers that are provided? What about the service mesh for them, right? I think that's your point.
yeah, and then my point is, okay, so there's the problem statement, few issues on document. That's good. For example, for example, appendix contain the report service such as Nephew Web UI and Porch System functional. That's fine. And that's the issue. But where we define the requirement around that, I mean, so it's not specific. An example shown in just for network function. But I think, in my opinion, service mesh. I think we need a service mesh for network built-in the components and the controller. And also we need to have requirement for the vendor and operator when they add the custom controller, what and how they're gonna configure their service mesh. Those information, I think, hope we can get it. This is requirements for now is good, but we need to specific requirement who doing what. So also it's service mesh network function, who's gonna configure the service mesh for network function. Is the vendor's operator the responsibility or nephew? So anyway, usually requirement and use cases, and so who's doing what, and then what they required for resolve the issues. Anyway, that's I'm trying to see, but the document is pretty good, but I like to have more detail the information there. Did that make sense? Or
Yeah, so basically, I think your point is how will the configuration happen if we introduce our own controllers,
yeah,
right? That's
not
what I hear.
since this is a requirement, we're not talking about detail how yet. We're not designing, but I think the requirement should point to who's gonna do what. And then, for example, when they customer deploy, the operator deploy, vendor deploy network function, for example, and then for those to protect those network function, then who's responsible for, and then where we in the architecture we are putting the service mesh. So those information, so and also there's Nephew built-in components. I think Nephew team need to provide service mesh for that. And then, but the vendor operator, they can inject their own controller, custom controller. Then who's gonna responsible for those the component security? That's kind of those.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Bing, thank you for the review. Are the points that you just mentioned mentioned in the document? I presume that it is already mentioned in the document.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I think
Yeah,
that
so
we're gonna.
the comments are added. Yeah.
Hey, Rameshwar. Seems like you have been unmuted by mistake.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries. Okay.
So I'll continue to provide my feedback, and then I have some, and then Shiv going to respond. Shiv going to add some additional. Then you will be kind of iteration. I don't know when is the due date for this.
Yeah. So what two things, right? So that's what we're going to discuss. One thing is we need to clearly identify the scope for R3 deliverables. So that is one of the scope for R3 deliverables is something that we might want to identify. And maybe in the last a couple of weeks back, we discussed that ideally we should be ready by end of Jan. But if not,
end of Jan,
which is essentially today.
Okay, that's the tomorrow. Okay.
So that doesn't seem to be happening. But the P0 activities that we had identified, at least some of those things are well in place. Primarily on the OpenSSF part and all the other things, right?
I think now the good thing is we topic are in place, as you said. So that's for tomorrow, but the detail is still a work in progress, right? So,
Yeah.
but we set the topic secret service meshes and package validation and identity and access management. That's the whole user story. Big. We set the scope for R3, but detail we have to discuss. Okay.
Correct. What worries me, if you ask me, right, is that both of these have dependencies on the identity solution.
Connection there, yes.
Yeah, there is a big connection there, and right now we don't have a good handle on the identity part. So in the last meeting when Brian presented the identity part, he mentioned about both the user identity and workload identity to be included in the scope. After skimming through the document, I see that the document is a little bit light on the workload part of things. It's primarily focused towards the user identity, client identity, and the RBAC side of things. So I'm just kind of a little bit concerned about that particular point where if we do not handle the identity part properly, that might become a hurdle for completion of some of these deliverables.
Okay, so
Something to keep in mind, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Anything else in the context here?
I think you want to talk about secret or the identity access management update too?
Yeah. So if from the service mesh perspective, is there any other update or any other point anyone else would like to bring in?
Not now, and I'll share offline. So
okay, all right.
On the document as a comment.
Sounds good. Thank you. So going into the secrets management updates, I see that it has been reviewed in detail. Maybe we can open up the floor.
No major comment from me. It's okay.
I saw that Tom had reviewed the document. So Prashant, maybe you can give a quick update as to what the points were, where do we stand, and what kind of updates are expected.
Yeah, so one question, like one other option that Tom added was that instead of using a word-like tool, we could use the Kubernetes. Like Kubernetes has an API for encrypting data at rest. He even put the link there. If you see the first comment.
Yeah. So from the requirement perspective, do we want to say that, we might want to decouple these two things where we might want to integrate with one or two different solutions to begin with, but eventually it should be highly decoupled in the sense that folks should be able to use a Vault or CyberArk or any other thing that is available in open source. Or
so I kind of mentioned that further down is there's likely to be existing strategic tools in companies for storing these things and for managing them. So whilst for a kind of reference implementation and for documentation purposes and testing purposes, it makes sense to focus on one thing. I think whatever we do we need to make sure that it works, or it could work. As you say, someone might be using HashiCorp Vault, someone might be using CyberArk, someone might be using something else entirely different. And I think all of those are valid things to use to store secrets. I think the point that was just being made was my first comment was there's an internal mechanism which doesn't require an external Vault platform. If the initial requirement is encrypt the data, we can do that without an extra platform potentially. And it was just a question of whether we want to include that as a step one.
Yeah, this should be identified as an explicit point, right? Prashant, is that yeah, so I don't see an explicit requirement here as of now, unless Prashant, you would like to correct me regarding this.
What do you mean by explicit requirement? Like
we want to decouple, right? Like a secrets manager, what secrets manager gets used in the target environment. The point is that different organization depends upon secrets management tools, and most organizations have some sort of strategy around how to deal with secrets, and they would ideally want to work with one or
Oh,
the
I
other.
added that in design and architecture. Like it's just 2 points because I wasn't sure.
Okay.
If you go above, yeah, like yeah, this common layer for deployment in design and architectural consideration.
Okay.
I think, yeah,
Okay.
interoperability, right? I think that's what.
Yeah. So eventually, if you have to tick mark the functional requirement, this is what we're going to tick mark. Like, once we have the detailed design in place, is this what we're going to, this needs to be a little bit more more fine-tuned.
Yeah,
Needs to be
okay,
much more
I'll update it.
specific. Okay, yeah. Okay. Okay.
And I guess for like testing and all that, we can use like we can use an open source tool. But first, like yeah, we need to make a common grounds for implementing this. Then we can for testing we can add that open source tool integration.
No, no, this document is primarily from the requirements perspective, right, Prashant? So we don't even have to worry about how and the test part. Like, those are much later phases. And I think before we go into the implementation, there will be certain questions about how to do it, who does it, and where to do it, and things like that. That there will be substantial discussions there. But just identifying the clear set of requirements that and then floating it around other working groups and SIGs would be important. So we have to take a call as to when this document is ready to be put it around. I'm hoping that it would be
Okay, yeah, I'll update the requirements and ask for review again.
cool. Okay, and maybe the requirements, right, might have to be a little bit more detailed in terms of in the context, and it should be contextual in the sense that it has to take into consideration the nephew side of things, right? Maybe this is what again the reviewers might also have to point out. I believe there might I see a lot of reviews handled. Just a point.
Yeah, okay.
Cool.
Is the it's Wimir, sorry,
Hey,
is the access control to the token, is that also a requirement? I just sorry, I was a bit late. Is that part of the requirements? Who is able to access that secret
Yeah,
or that
like
token or whatever?
identity, we might need some identity management for clusters.
Yeah.
So like this particular secret is only for this cluster.
Correct.
How will that identify? So maybe identity management would be needed here.
So in most cases, right, what I have seen is that a layer of since this is the multi-cluster, it's going to be a multi-cluster identity solution. We need a multi-cluster identity solution. The situation demands for it, right? So I mean, based on what Tim mentioned on the Slack channel, it makes sense to actually have something like Spiffy leveraging service account token as a way to authorize and get a Spiffy ID and do identity in that model. That will work, but that's a whole together altogether different requirement, or completely different set of requirement, which is applicable not only for secrets management but also for service mesh and few other aspects of security. Identity is sort of
but see, I mean, if identity, because most of the time security identity is a must, right? So is it then not better that we first focus on identity management and then tackle the others? Because if there is a natural, let's say, dependency, then it's stupid to start doing something for secrets while we have the base. I always think of sort out the base first. If you build your foundation right, you can build a house, right? And if it's not right, the house will fall apart.
Correct. No, so Wim, that's a good point. But in general, what I've seen is that already most of the service meshes and the secrets management tools are already decoupled from the identity solution. So it won't be such a big problem for us to actually think in parallel about doing both these things. But eventually there will be some sort of coupling that will be involved. Like, it is possible for us to use secrets management purely with native Kubernetes constructs such as service account token for authorization purpose and be done with it. But that's not going to work in the context of Nephew, which means we'll have to work with something like
but at least we should list it as a requirement, I think,
yes,
right?
yes,
At the minimum,
Yeah.
right?
True. And that is where I feel an attempt was being made in the last call to discuss about IAM systems.
Sorry, could I comment on the
Yes,
last
please.
point? Manuel speaking. Yes, the identity management maybe has a relation with the secret management for the fact that I need to protect the identity and then maybe using encryption and so on and so forth. But from a functional perspective, I think that the management of the identity itself is more related to the access control, and then keep together, as we proposed last time, identity and access management. And then maybe we need to work together to see the relation and the possible interaction. But if we think to the identity exposed to the external world, is from a functional perspective, is not just secret management. Maybe secret management could be used to protect them once I have to store them.
Yeah.
I don't know if the point you are the same idea or not.
There is connection when we work on the IAM for other projects. For example, we need to store secret information, but at that time we didn't use a vault, and put some connection there. So using the IDP, the encryption capability, but some of the default, they have a same encryption capability there. But to make it the more system-wide end-to-end secret management, connecting to vault is more, the more production quality. But so definitely the connection. So I'm not sure how you're gonna scope the for R3. Maybe they introduced okay, we manage some secret this way. By identity access management, we just providing identity roles and then access control to the Nephew UI, and then also Porch, and how to define the access control for packages and others. That's yeah, definitely connection there.
Yes, but the management of the protocol, I mean, the flow that you use for authentication is something that functionally is not exactly secret management.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the separate things. This is for when we store and then some, those, sensitive information, which is secret, and some token sensitive information. But access management, those the functional, we use different. Yeah, there's a different, but there's a connection there because identity access management, they need to store some user secret information. At that time, we can use a secret, but yeah, the protocol, the authentication, authorization, that's a separate domain.
Okay.
I think we have already spilled over to this particular discussion, which is good because I have one basic question in the context to the folks here. So do we need to think about user authentication, RBAC, and workload authentication or workload identity in the same this thing, because there might the requirements might be quite different for both these things.
I think we should focus only on workload identity for the purposes of the services within a cluster talking to other clusters. I think the companies that are likely to deploy this, or the vendors that are likely to kind of bundle this or use it as part of a product, are going to kind of I think we should use the native capabilities for user access management that people already have in place.
So do you prefer workload identity management first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that seems to be a bigger problem today No, I wouldn't say that seems to be a bigger problem. I would say because what I heard from the discussion a few weeks into SIG formation was that there was a great need for identity and access management from the user perspective as well, because we now have a management console and management plane and all those. So there is a requirement for that as well.
Okay.
So I'm not sure from the week, but these work items for sure depend upon workload identity more than user identity. There is some relation to user identity as well, but primary requirement right now seems to be more focused towards workload identity.
So,
I also think that there is a relation between the user identity and the workload identity, meaning that at the end, who is the originator of the workload? I mean, there would be someone or some application that trigger the workload. And for accountability, we need to take them related. I mean, the originator of the operation and the operation itself.
That's the typical mapping between the who's originator and then checking the also authentication, authorization role. Then it will be
exactly.
map into workload identity. Then we know the end-to-end traceability. Yeah, okay. So that's when I hear Tom or in the comment, yes, we can focus, but typically there's starting from user and they know who access this workload, who are creating this, who who update this. Otherwise, we're just starting from the middle. I don't know. So I have to think about it.
Yeah, and I have another question that is, okay, in this nephew world, we are mainly focused on the workload, and that's perfect. But when we think to the access to the system coming from the external world, do you have in mind some other kind of user for different use cases? For not just for the workload management, but for something else that need something different with respect to the access to Porch or with Porch, we cover everything. Every user and client that access the Nephew system is going to do something on Porch because Git is the only true source of truth, or do you have in mind something else, someone else from an administration perspective that need to access to the system and do something? I ask this because when we think about identity and access management, and if we want a centralized solution, we need to keep into account all the possible access to the system.
I think Vim has a question.
No, I was going to give my perspective on this.
Okay.
Okay, we are focused on Git. Okay.
No.
Okay.
I basically, my perspective is that we have not built in, and that's the other thing. See, when we designed the system, we talked about roles and responsibilities, but we actually just talked about, no, we did do a little bit about it. But so, in other words, even today in a cluster, I mean, the people from the operator community can correct me if I'm wrong, but even today, you could say that NF, infra, and security are three different roles in the organization that potentially have rights, different rights into the system, right? Would that be fair?
It is my opinion too. I was just interested in the others' opinion. Okay.
No. So in other words, we are aligned, I think, or we agree on that. Whether the roles that I just explained are the right ones or different ones, that's a different discussion probably. But there would be different teams responsible for different aspects of the system, right? And as a result, so today what we try to do, I think, where we haven't really done it properly yet, but when we designed the CRs, we designed them from perspective from the CRDs that this is for a particular role in the organization. Okay. I believe that packages going forward, we have to put the same, let's say, philosophy upon. A package comes from from an owner that owns something, and the rights to the package is controlled for a given role, right? And he can put requirements to the other teams, right? But that's that will be a system that we consume somehow. So in other words, I would agree with you is that today it should not be one big blob, right? It should be segmented into those roles and responsibilities. And as a result, we should build a system that accommodates that, right? Because in production, I have the feeling, or I have the view that there should not be one big entity. Even if it's in Git, we should have different people accessing it and have different access rights.
Yeah, yeah, of course, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Tom has its hand as well, I think.
Tom?
Yeah, I just want to, so I totally agree with the point that we need to be able to segregate and have granular permissions per role. I don't think I don't think we should be defining what those roles are or what those permissions are as part of this project. I think that each company that deploys Nefio will need to do that themselves. So we just need to enable it rather than define it. Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
we should just use. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
No problem. So for sure, RBAC. So the access, the role-based access control, but maybe with all this new stuff, also ABAC, meaning that we control the access according to some specific parameter inside the Porch file, and maybe also the value that they assume in this file. ABAC, you know, attribute-based access control. Could be then an important requirement in this new world.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Now, in my view, if we segment the packages already and the CRs to a certain role, right? If we can basically map them, then there is less constraint. I don't know whether we can. I think I re-looked at what we did in R1 and R2 and segmented it differently with that in mind. And I find a way to do so. At the moment, we did it fairly okay, but we did some. What it means basically, we have to split some of these packages into pieces. But as such, you could actually segment the system in that way that uses that as a baseline. And then, but I agree with Tom, we should not probably define those, but maybe for the sake of discussion or for the sake of, so far we always used two roles so far, infra and network function. So we split those two. That has been always from R1 has been our, let's say, roles that we somehow define, but I think maybe we shouldn't go further than that, because everyone will be different, right? But
that makes sense. Yeah, I think to one of the points I think was being made about whether we do include the user authentication, user identity management. I think my concern is that certainly the way I'm thinking about it is the workload identity management. That's something that needs to be delivered along with the Nefio project, like the product. You know, if you're deploying Nefio, then you need the workloads to be able to be identified, to identify themselves, to be able to manage the secrets, blah 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 blah, etc. Whereas the user authentication, user identity management is going to be entirely dependent on which container platform, largely, Nefio is deployed onto. So if you're using Tanzu or OpenShift or EKS or GKE, the way a user authenticates to that platform is going to change. And so I agree we should make sure that user authentication in RBAC is enabled and considered. But I'm not convinced it's something that we should be prioritizing as a kind of functional thing, because it's just so dependent on where Nefio is deployed.
So Tom, so that means the user identity, you just leave that configuration for user identity to whoever nephew users, and they have their own identity access management, and they can define user role and then tenants, realms, whatever they do, and they define role. And for nephew, the out of box we deliver, we just deliver with a workload identity. Is that you're saying?
Kind of. So
Okay.
I do agree that reference implementations. So let's say we make sure that we can integrate with I don't know some identity platform for users, and we document it and we use that as part of testing, and we're using OIDC and yada yada yada. Fine, but that I don't think that can be the only opinionated way that users authenticate to Nefio, because that just won't work for many deployments. Whereas the workload identity, I think that can be opinionated in terms of, because I think that's a kind of inherent part of what Nefio is and how it works and how the services talk to each other.
One more comment about we discussed about this item. It's going to be reference implementation requirement or the external extended point. So for nephew, for security perspective, I don't know. We can talk about the priority, but I like to go for reference user management first as an implementation using Kickrag or something. We choose it and then we deploy, and part of the nephew base the delivery, because otherwise nephew itself doesn't have a user management. So even though we just put the Kickrag, so we just configure. This is the base configuration start,
Yeah.
and then
It's an example. Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, that's my suggestion.
I wonder if they can be decoupled a little. So you mentioned using Keycloak. It's fine.
The requirement doesn't talk about the
parallel.
Yes. Requirement about Kickrag is just example, but without dictating, right? The vendor can use one. But reference implementation, nephew has to choose. If we want to deliver part of the system, we have to choose which tool we're gonna use as a reference. But following the standard interfaces, those things, it can be replaced with the other item, the implementation. So.
Yes, maybe it can be just a broker and make brokering toward some external identity provider. Anyway, we need to put some requirement also in the interface toward this external identity provider. For security reason, and to guarantee the integrity of the system, and then maybe requiring standard interfaces, even if not exactly a specific system with a specific behavior. And there are a lot of different flows that are available to use.
An example we used in ONAP, we use OS2 proxy, which connecting that to ingress. So OS2 proxy can point to our reference Kickrag implementation or the external the items. So that means, but requirement or architecture, we have to have some kind of a connection point, like OS2 proxy, like when you said, Manuela. So anyway, so requirement, we have to consider what's the reference implementation for requirement for that, and what is the extension point, and what's the part of the delivery of the nephew. So okay.
Okay. So based on what I'm hearing, that the user identity might depend upon some components which are still very different from the workload identity. And what Tom mentioned was workload identity can be opinionated. I think that is the general trend that we are seeing anyways. For example, Tim called out on Slack that ORAN is planning to use Piffy for workload identity and planning to do natively integrated in the ORAN model. Right? So if that happens to be the case, and we know that ONAP has also moved in the same direction. So 2 points: do we want to separate out the requirements from the workload identity and the user identity perspective, because they seem to be different from even from the reference implementation perspective or from the design point of view as
I think we should, yes.
Right. Okay. I hear one point. Anyone else has any opinion in the context?
For workload identity, I think, yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. What else? Anything in the context?
Not before moving manual, and then before moving internally, Brian, Manuel, myself, the co-worker, we defined the documentation that Brian provided. So we're gonna provide you more user story as you know following
Super,
this
super.
based on feedback. And also at the one of the diagram in there, we just focus on the user identity and then some other machine identity, for the package management. But we're gonna explore further internally, and then I think we're gonna provide more detail. I think that's my understanding. Manuel, is that right? Right? That's our plan, right?
Yeah. It's perfect for me.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. With that, let's move on to the next agenda item. I think I would like to go for this agenda item discussion first. Subhash, do you want to go for it first?
Yeah, sure. Let me share my screen.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just please let me know if it's visible.
Yes, it is visible. Yes, it is visible. Go ahead.
Am I audible now? Sorry, I was
Now you
talking
are.
on mute.
Now you are.
Yeah.
Now you are.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, 2 weeks back, actually, we were discussing on the idea of the policy framework, and we all agreed that it is covering a lot. It's like the scope is very big. So that's why we decided to break down into the two smaller parts. One which will address the problem of policy package validation, and that will deal with the static policies. Like we can see the KRMs and we can validate it whether it's fulfilling all the best practices for related to Kubernetes or deployment, or there any security issues are there, so that we can identify much early than before deploying it. So there we are trying to give an idea of a shift left approach, like validate everything before the deployment. So yeah, so that was actually the feature overview. We would like to provide validation of the package before it gets deployed, and we will ensure that all the Kubernetes best practices or even any security aspects all are addressed in terms of creating the policies. So the stakeholders for this user stories would be the DevOps, security team, and the QA team, which actually will create those artifacts or deploy those artifacts, and they will parallelly they will configure the policy to meet the security to meet the integrity of the system. So I'll directly jump on that design. So last time we were discussing about the approval controller. So the place where exactly we can hook and the package validation. This is the feature or this capability we can get out of the box. It's like we without touching the existing functionality of the Nephew. Let it be keep there, and we will just hook our controller and try to achieve this functionality. So generally, the package starts KPT package. They start with the draft version. So when all the package, all the specializers, they work together to meet the condition, required condition, based on the readiness state and the conditions. Actually, it comes to the approval controller, and the approval controller checks whether all the conditions are met or not. And based on that, it will go to the proposed state. The package goes to the proposed state, and once it is there, automatically we will promote it to the approved state, and finally it will get pushed to the GTR of the workload cluster, and finally it will get deployed. So what we are trying to do it, we are trying to realize another controller or another the possibilities like admission controller will keep on watching the package creation, and whenever there is a package revision in the proposed state, we will take that package and we will evaluate the policy on that particular package, and once based on that result, we will annotate the package saying that it passes our security check or not, and finally again it will go back to the approval controller, and based on those annotation, it will mark it approve or not approve. So I tried to create one very simplistic workflow, like all the specializer work to enrich the package or to hydrate the package, and they will add their configuration, and then and finally approval controller keep on checking on those conditions, and whenever they meet it, it updates the package status to proposed, and same way the parts receive it, and yeah, there is a this new control, actually I called it package validation controller. Okay, so it will also getting those updates like about the package revision object, and it will check that if the package revision object is under proposed state, it will run those policies, and based on that it will add the annotation pass or fail, and now the approval controller need to take a decision by the help of this annotation, or it can it's like based on this annotation, actually it can mark whether we need to go for further on package processing, or I mean to say whether we would like to publish it or not, so that we can do it. And yeah, with that context, actually a few things I have called it, like in this user story I did not mark like a policy for the validation process. It's not in the scope, so I tried to say that currently this is just addressing that workflow, and the creation of the policy that can be done separately, and that policy could be taken here, and a policy could be evaluated. And again, one more thing I did not mention it here, how to fetch the policy from the policy repository, or from the end user. So as a functional requirement, I just put it like stakeholders should able to manage the policy, and there should be a CRUD operation for the policy management. Like we can create a new policy and maintain all the related policies, and also we should have the capability to evaluate the policy, and it can be integrated with a different framework like OPA or Kyber. And also I talked about the feedback and the reporting. So let's say a package is not getting validated, so we need to create the report or provide the feedback by what are the security issues, or what are the non-compliance are there, so that we can do it. And again, non-functional requirements are system should be scalable, allow user to configure the various aspects of validation system, and the validation process should not introduce significant delay in the package processing. So yeah, so this was the requirement I had introduced. So yeah, Rahul, I can see your hand is raised.
Yeah. I have a question in the context of, can you go back to the call flow that you prepared below?
Yeah.
So what I wanted to understand is point number 3 says that check if condition is met for readiness gate, right?
Yeah.
So what are these conditions? And these conditions will essentially form the requirements, the security requirements from the.
No. It is a part of the conditional dance. So for example, we need an IP address. So we will check whether the UPA for those interfaces we have the IP address or not, LAN. So this is the existing functionality, like this approval controller. No?
Okay.
It is already existing in the nephew.
Okay. But then what are the security requirements here? Like if I may ask you, what are the security requirements from?
For example, the DevOps team plans that we should not put IP address on certain certain segment or certain LAN segment or certain network. Okay, So he can put those IP as a blocked or in the policy. And let's say as a part of this conditional done, suppose for the interface we got an IP address which lies in that particular LAN or LAN segment. So that time we can just mark it like this is the problem. It is not matching with the policy. So that is the one example. And also we can take some example around the LAN also. Some LAN you don't allow it, but due to your backend or existing functionality, somehow you're getting those VLAN IDs, and we don't want to allow actually in your workload cluster. So those kind of configuration you can do it. And even the some best practices like you have certain structure in the package, like suppose for the deployment you should have the you have specified the memory capabilities or memories or certain like a requirement you can put it. But yeah, of course, in the package, in the management cluster, we will not find any deployment. It will be an NF deployment. So we will not see any resource related to deployment. But yeah, we need to thought through that. Means like in NF deployment, what kind of policy we can inject it so that we can meet the best practices for the Kubernetes. So that thing those policies we need to think through. But of course, IP and VLAN I see a valid use case.
So those are the real requirements, right, from the security perspective that we might want to clearly document as to these are the full because everything else, the functional requirement that is mentioned in the document based on what I saw, but primarily from the framework perspective, right? Like, we need to have policy management, CRUD APIs,
right.
But the security use cases are, that gets eventually fulfilled by this have to be clear.
Yeah, that I actually, yeah, Rahul, actually, this actually I called for the second user story. So like where we need to discuss with the security experts what policy actually you would like to place in the package validation process. So there we need a help of any security expert.
One question I think they're probably similar. This is the package validation procedure.
Yeah.
That's fine. This is fine, but from security perspective, we need to talk about the authorization. If someone asks I want to process package validation, and then based on the user authorization, authentication, can he do it or cannot do it? That's, to me, from a security perspective, that's the concern. Because someone asked a porch to, I want to update PR object, and from security is, no, you're not authorized. Then we reject it. But this is we're not talking about the package validation. That's another process for based on policy-based validator. That's fine, okay? When if you try to link to security, and I think mainly talk about authorization. That's my still try to digest, but this process, right? The arrow going back and forth, that's fine. That's the package validation process.
Right.
But when you try to inject security, then it's based on who initiate this, that we reject or not. That's based on authorization, authentication. That's I try to get. But hiding for some IP address, that's not the secret information. But anyway, just the package validation is a procedure, and if you need to support based on policy, that's I'm taking. Is that right?
Yeah. It's like for definitely for the use case, we can work together, and we can bring actually those good practices. So that's why I call it currently. It is not in the scope. So I tried to call it. It's a framework. So once we are able to form those policies, right, we'll able to evaluate it in context of package, or even we can bring authorization, authentication. So those kind of features also we can bring it. But yeah, the simplest way of simplest requirement for the framework we will fulfill by this user story. So it talks about policy evaluation, means how you evaluate the policy. So that it talks about, and also it talks about when the package gets rejected and accepted to meet certain best practices. So those actually we can create as a second part of the user story. But here it talks about just a framework, just a first baby step. Okay.
Cool. So in terms of review, right? Like, do you think it is good for review? The draft is good for review?
That I would ask to this group. Any comments? Do you think?
Do you have any major updates pending in this document, or do you think it's good for to call
currently? I did not see any comments because I have shared it today itself. So
okay.
Yeah.
Basically, there's a call for review, right? Like,
yeah.
Is anyone interested in reviewing this document, checking whether the requirements are in sync with what we want to do? Or we can reach out in Slack and call for review, right, Subhash?
Yeah, of course.
Cool.
And Raul, actually, the second part we talked about the runtime policies. So maybe we will once I'll able to understand that people are ready to
so that comes as part of the next step, right? Like based on what I heard from you, the actual validation rules and those form the subsequent scope, right? Like based on the best practices.
Yeah, I mean, after this we'll go to the runtime policies. Actually, we'll try to do that.
Yeah, okay, there are a lot of best practices that might have to be done before going there, right? Like,
yeah, Rahul, actually, I'll just again clarify. Here, I talked about the policy which will be part of evaluating the package here, okay? And the second part, I'm talking about runtime policies which we will inject inside the workload cluster. Okay, so that is like where the cube armor will actually play an important role. Okay.
Hey, Wim has a hand raised.
Yeah.
Yeah. So first thing is we should split the use case in two things, right? So it's similar comment that I gave before. And so you have a management cluster part, you have a workload cluster part. Split it in two, right? So
actually, I did.
Clear, right?
Yeah, I did.
Make two documents. It's two different use cases from my perspective. The second thing is that on the management cluster, there's nothing new to be done because we use OPA and Kyverno as is, right? So there is what is it that we have to do in Nephew to do that? Because if we use pure OPA and Kyverno as a tool, we have everything in my view. What is missing?
Yeah, I would say we need to write those policies, and we need to hook with the approval system, right? In approval system, actually, it decides approval controller that decides when the package goes from the proposed state to
yeah, but if you don't need anything on the approval, because if the proposed doesn't go through and nobody approves and OPA basically holds the line, there's nothing to be approved, right? So you'll never get the approval because OPA is your approval guy. So in other words, by hooking Kyverno and thing inside and they basically deny, you will not approve.
Actually,
so this is what we have to flush out. Basically, in my view, it's because you have to look at it from what are, if you want to succeed in a use case, you have to, at some point, basically identify the impact and discuss what it means. And we have to flush that out with a bunch of people. So because otherwise we flush just use cases through the pipeline and that doesn't help either, right? The goal is to review it and see what the implication is. And then based on that, decide whether we go ahead or move forward with it, right? Otherwise, we are just flushing use cases through the pipe, and it will not be helpful anyhow.
But Wim, actually, I'm trying to add the capability in the approval so that it can work along with the OPA policies. And
what I'm trying to say is that it should not be. You should decouple it. Because it's a step before approval.
Okay, right. Let's say assume that the OPA is stopped.
Subhash, maybe I'll have to interrupt here. 1 minute left to go.
Okay.
Sorry about this, but I think we'll have to make sure that. So just one more point. I think it's best we'll have to continue this discussion. Clearly, it's not going to get finished another
Yeah,
2 minutes,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Okay.
So for the next TSC meeting, Raj and Tom, would you be able to present the updates? Because I won't be present. Just a quick heads up. Raj, are you there? Raj or Tom? Tom has already left. Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. Sure, I
Okay.
can work with Tom to take care of
Super.
it.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else before we close up? 10 more seconds. Thank you, folks.
So Rahul, yeah, Subhash. So if Wim could add his comments on the document, maybe we can discuss there also.
I think okay. One thing is, yes, based on this points, right? Maybe you can share the document directly to Wim on the Slack, and then call for a review.
Okay.
Maybe he might make the specific comments, right? Today, the most important comment that was made is splitting of user plane versus cluster requirements, right? Like that's
that I did already, Rahul. It's like I segregated it.